chapter 1, verses 17 to 27, and I invite Gail to come and share that with us this morning.
Reading is from James 1, 17 to 27, found on page 1196 in our two Bibles in the New Testament. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like the shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in the mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. Whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. Those who consider themselves religious, yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues, deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and flawless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. The Word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
So this morning I figured we would have a little discussion about work, because today is a day that we celebrate and remember all of the work and the contribution that people have done, that we have done in our lives. And so I've entitled this message, The Labors of Love. And so we're going to look at some of the things that God requires of us, some of the work that God calls us into, and we're also going to look at the role of work in our lives. So I have some opening reflections for you this morning to start with. And the first one is, reflect on the work you have done in your life. And by that I'm thinking specifically the vocational work that you've done. Whether it's in your family, whether you've been a stay-at-home mom or dad, whether you're in the workforce, whether you're retired, however that looks, think about the work you have done in your life. And what have been some of the greatest blessings, and what have been some of the greatest challenges for each of you. Next, I want you to reflect on your Christian journey and service. How have you lived out your faith? What work or service has God called you to do? And again, what have been the greatest blessings and the greatest challenges of that work? So I think probably the best place to start this morning is just by saying thank you to all of you for all of the work that you have done in your lives. You have contributed to your families, to your community, to the this church. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for all of the hard work and all of the time and energy that you have put in. And so this day is really a celebration, as I said, of the work that people have done to make this nation a great place to live. And even though we have what we consider to be an interesting time in which we live in, I think if we were to go back in time, I think every single generation would say that same thing. Each generation has its own set of challenges and struggles that they have to endure through and figure out how to live through. And so we're no different. So Labor Day, just to give you a brief history of that, was started in the late 19th century during the height of the American Industrial Revolution. And it was a very difficult time for many people. People were coming in from the countrysides hoping to find work within cities and within cosmopolitan areas, or metropolitan areas, I should say. And people were beginning to work in factories to fuel and generate the industrial machine that was beginning to take place. And oftentimes these working conditions were very difficult. People would work 12-hour days, 6-7 days a week just to eke out a living. Children, probably not much older than some of the kids we have here, would work very similar hours. They would send them into mines and have them do work that a full-grown person couldn't do. And so as we reflect on that, we need to think of how and be thankful for how much stuff has changed. And due to some of the conditions that were there, we created a federal holiday in 1894 to celebrate the contribution of the work that people had done. And during this time, again, there's a lot of change. Labor unions begin to rise up to confront some of the poor work conditions, and we begin to see several strikes and things that go on, which really initiate this holiday. So going all the way back from 1894, again, we need to look at our lives. And I think, again, think of the things that we're thankful for. Thankful that many of us don't have to work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. Some people do. Yeah, some people work 2-3 jobs. And we need to be mindful of those people. We also have to realize that even today we continue to be a very busy people. We're drawn in several different directions with stuff constantly fighting and vying for our attention and for our time. And we need to figure out how we're going to do this life. How are we going to have balance between the work that we need to do or we think we need to do, and how do we balance that with the things God calls us to do. And so one of the things I'll start off with was that God designed us to work. Okay? In Genesis 2:15, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to care for it. Now guys, we were all alone. It was quiet. We were in the great outdoors. This was paradise. I'm telling you. Now the ladies are like, yeah, but you guys couldn't even last 3 verses before God had to make woman, and because you guys just weren't doing it right, then you needed a helper to help you along the way. But nonetheless, God designed us to work. Okay? And again, I think traditionally and historically across most places, we will find that generally, for a long period of time, most women worked within the home, that God had designed them to do certain work within the home. And men tended to be out doing other things out in the field or in different places like that. Now again, our culture has changed. You know, we see women in all sorts of places. We see some men stay at home and raise children and raise the family. And I think that that's okay. The point is, again, that we're all designed to work and to do stuff to contribute to our families, to our communities. So then James begins to talk about some of the work that God calls us to do, what I would call some of the labors of love. And he begins his address here with the scriptures, "For every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of heavenly lights, who's not changing like shifting shadows." And what he's saying here is that, we serve the God of the universe, the God that has created the sun and the moon and the stars, and God does not change. Okay? Night may give way to day, and day may give way to night, but God never changes. God is the author of that creation, and so he doesn't change. And he desires to give us good things. He gave us the word of truth that we might be a kind of first fruits. And this word of truth is really the redemption that God has given us. The fact that he sent his only son to die on a cross to pay a price that we could never pay. And so we have salvation. God has done the work beforehand. God is working now. God will continue to work into our futures. Now, most of us here, if we have given our life to Christ, we get to understand what it means to be a kind of first fruit. We understand that because of what God has done for us, we too need to go out and we need to share the word of truth. We need to share the gospel message with other people. And our lives are symbolic of what it looks like to be a Christian, to be a person of redemption. Okay? And so we're set forth as a first fruit for all of those who are yet to come into the kingdom of God. And now I can't think of probably a better verse or a more poignant verse than this one today. And it says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires." Now, we don't have to go very far, especially when we dig into the political realm, to see where this just is not lived out. One person says one thing, and immediately the other side jumps on that, and they're anything but quick to listen. They're very quick to speak, and they're very quick to become angry. Okay? And so, folks, some of the labors of love that we need to do is we need to do the very hard work of listening. And we need to develop not just good communication, but good understanding. That we're truly listening and looking at the hearts of the people that may have very different views than us, and trying to understand why they like or why they believe those things. Likewise, we hope that people will do the same for us. And so when we look at some of the chaos that goes on when we're so quick to be right and we're so quick to argue with each other, and we look at how angry people become and how quickly violence seems to come about in our day and age, what would happen if we truly step back and listen to each other? And I want to encourage you just to take a moment and look around this place. Look at each other right now. Because I can guarantee you that even in this church, there are people who think very differently about a good many things. And what happens in our church when we don't truly begin to listen to each other? We move into conflict. We move into anger. Okay, and God doesn't call us to do that. Now, anger is a natural emotion. I'm not saying we should never, ever get mad. But we need to learn to deal with our anger in a very healthy way. And I think one of the things that helps us with our anger is to be quick to listen and slow to speak. Because when we do that, we don't become so reactionary to the things that other people say. But James doesn't just leave us there, because quickly in the next couple verses, he says, well, don't merely listen to the word so as to deceive yourself, but actually do what it says. For anyone who listens to the word but doesn't do it is like someone who goes before a mirror, and then when he walks away, he or she forgets who they are. And so, folks, it does us absolutely no good to open this book and go, oh, that was wonderful, that's great, and then take it and toss it on the coffee table and walk away and never live out what the words just said. Okay? And what James is dealing with here is really what's called intellectual assent, and it's very prevalent in our day. And that is that we have become consumers of almost everything. We consume so much information, and we tend to know a lot about a lot of different things. You know, we're kind of like armchair experts at everything now. Okay? But the thing about it is, if we don't actually ever go out and practice or do that thing, are we really an expert at it? No, we just think we know a lot. Okay, and this is what he's saying. There's a lot of Christians today that know a lot about God, but their lifestyles are anything but what it looks like to live out the scriptures. And I can say even in my own life, there was a period of time where I was pretty smart when it came to talking about the scriptures and talking about the things of God. But my life didn't resemble any of the things I was saying. They were merely empty words. And James says, well, you're just like a person who goes before a mirror and then walks away and can't remember what they look like. I mean, think about that. That's a pretty stark example of what it looks like when we do that. And now oftentimes people will say, well, isn't James contradicting what Paul says? All you need to have is faith. And yes, Paul talks a lot about just having faith, but he would also argue that if you're not being transformed by your faith, you really don't have a faith. Okay, and so folks, we really do need to live this out. When we read the scriptures, we need to actually do what it says. And let me just talk, before I go into this, let me talk a little bit about our personal work. Because there are some of us who absolutely love what we do. We find amazing purpose in the things that we do. But if you're here today and you're struggling in your place of work, then let me tell you, you know what, I've been there before. I understand that too. I understand what it looks like. You know, I used to be in a job that I absolutely despised. I worked Friday, Saturday, Sunday when I was going to school. I'd get Monday off. By Tuesday morning, I was already thinking about how much I didn't want to go to work on Friday again. Okay? It was just terrible. I was in constant confrontation with authority. I didn't treat my coworkers with any respect. I did the absolute bare minimum because I knew they couldn't fire me because I knew enough of the rules that it was going to be impossible to get rid of me. And yet, I was absolutely miserable. Okay? And so one of the things that if you're in that place right now, I'm going to tell you to live out your faith. Go to that place of work like you would as going to work for God. And I will guarantee you that you will probably find that as the quickest way out of that current position. That when you really begin to work as if you're working for God in that job that you don't like, that God will immediately begin to open doors. And I will also say that if you're unhappy with the work you do, then maybe that too is a sign that God is calling you to something else. Because as I reflected back over that period in my job, I realized that God had been calling me out of there for a long time. And yet because I wanted to play it safe, because I had a decent paycheck coming in, it was a lot easier for me to just stay in that spot than it was to actually go where God was leading me. And so I ended up being just comfortably miserable. Okay? But then, so now let's go on and do the actual work that comes from God. And it says, whoever looks into the perfect law gives freedom and continues, not forgetting what they heard, but doing it. And they will be blessed by what they do. And that again leads me to that point that we are to do the work, whether it's in the family or whether it's in our place of work. We're to do that work as if we're doing it to God. And when we do that, I really believe that we will feel a sense of fulfillment of our purpose. That we will feel deeply connected. Because the honest fact of it is, for most of us, we spend 8 to 12 hours in a profession, and that's a lot of our waking time every day of the week. Okay? And so, why wouldn't we take a major area of our life and actually do that, see that as a ministry field for God? You look at eternity. Is it locked? So then James moves on to his next verse in 26, where he talks about those who consider themselves religious but don't keep a rein on their tongue. And again, this goes back to that idea of being slow to listen, or being quick to listen and slow to speak. Because, again, as Proverbs says, there's life and death in the tongue. As people, we have the power to speak life into people, or we have the power to suck the life out of them by the things we say. And so we need to make sure that we're not, and the same goes for our spiritual relationship. When we're taking the Lord's name in vain and we're not honoring them and we're saying one cuss word after the other, we begin to suck the energy out of our spiritual life. And the same goes for the people we interact with. We have the power to build them up and give them life and energize them, or we have the power to suck the spirit right out of them and drag them down. And Matthew 12:36 tells us that we will be accountable for every idle word that we say. Okay, and I think that's a pretty amazing responsibility we have. And I think of all of the words in my life that I have wasted, all of the words in my life that were not honoring, that were not love-filled. And so I pray every day that the words that come out of my mouth are indeed life-giving. And so, friends, I'm going to leave you with this then. The religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted in this world. And this, again, is God's work. I think probably the easiest way to understand that is to just live out the 2 great commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And if you do that, you will be looking after the orphans and widows. And you will also be making sure that you're staying in right relationship with God and taking care of yourselves. So friends, as we go forward, I hope that you will enjoy the work that you're doing. No matter what stage of life you're in, you have work to do. Whether you're one of these little kids that's just getting ready to go to daycare or school, or whether you find yourself in the prime of life and you're retired, guess what? You have work to do. I was just at the Global Leadership Summit, and John Maxwell was on there, and he said, just the other day I was talking with my dad. He's 96 years old, and my dad said to me, you know what, John? I think the greatest years of my life are still before me. At 96 years old, the best years of his life are still to come. And I thought, what a great example that is for us. So friends, no matter how young or how old you are, you have the best years of your life yet to live. All right, God bless. So some quick action steps. Continue your reflections on your vocational work and your Christian work. How do they align? Do they oppose each other? Have you grown as a person because of the work you have done in each of these areas? Identify one thing that would make you more effective in your current job or volunteer position, and then do that this week. And then are you doing the work or service God has called you to? And then again, identify one thing that will make you more effective and start or do that thing this week. And what new opportunities and labors of love might be God calling you into? I would really encourage you to explore these areas, especially within this new year. Are there places that God's saying, you know what? You used to do this, but I need you over here doing this. Or I have you here doing this, but you can do a way better job. I need you to think differently and expand this ministry that you're doing. So please really be in prayer and explore those areas. And then continue the breakthrough prayer that I have given you over the last 4 weeks of our Lord's Prayer sermon series. So please go back and continue to